We've got a very special guest today, very interesting. I am quite confused by what I've been hearing from him during the commercial breaks. We've been chatting. We're joined today by Mubin Shaikh. Thanks for being here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I have seen you in the news 100 times. You were the CSIS operative that blew the whistle on the Toronto 18 terrorist threat. Let's see the front page of the Sun the day that thing was come to light. It was a plan. Tell me a little bit. There it is. The plan: storm Parliament, kill the Prime Minister, blow up the CSIS offices, the Toronto Stock Exchange. What the hell? How did you get? Who? I mean, give our folks a quick refresher on that, and then I want to talk more about you. Tell me a little bit about the Toronto 18 in just a minute.
Yeah, in November 2005, I was sent to infiltrate a group of suspects that were under investigation and surveillance by CSIS. As the investigation progressed, I transferred to the RCMP as an agent, and at the end of the day, basically, they had developed a plot that they had in their mind that they were going to, take out Parliament, take out the Prime Minister, behead MPs one by one unless Canadian troops were immediately pulled out of Afghanistan. There was a whole fantasy associated with it.
But it was a fantasy, but they took actual steps to bring the fantasy to reality, right?
And that's the criminality.
Right.
I mean, you can have fantasies, but the second you take steps to realize that fantasy, you've gone into criminal code.
Now, you were undercover. I mean, you were using your own name with them, I take it?
Yes.
And you're a devout Muslim, am I right?
Yes, I try to be.
Yeah, I mean, it would take a certain legitimacy to be accepted by these folks. Tell me how a devout Muslim like you, it must have been, there must have been a tension, because these men, I'm sure, they did claim to be acting in the name of Islam. Yeah. You are a devout Muslim, and yet you chose to turn them into the Canadian democratically elected government. What went on in your mind? How did you have an identity conflict? Did you doubt who you were? Did you feel disloyal?
I did have internal conflicts. That's natural because we have a moral compass, so where it's going to kind of go here and there. But I mean, I grew up, born and raised here. When I was 19, I went to India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. I caught the jihad bug, if you will.
Did you do anything about it?
I didn't do anything, no. I was a supporter of violent extremism, I was. And then, long story short, after 9/11, I went to search for a Muslim utopia, and I went to Syria, of all places, but what I found was a police state. And I very quickly became disillusioned with the whole Islamist cause. And then when I actually studied the Quran in Arabic, the context of verses and things like that, I realized, my God, how good we have it in Canada. That was really my thing. So when I returned back, I volunteered to work with CSIS because I thought, hey, I mean, this is the best place on earth.
Well, let me ask you this. You're a devout Muslim, and we were talking to the break. Your wife is a Gentile convert to Islam. You were telling me she wears the niqab in public. That's the full, how did you describe it? Yeah, now you used a funny word.
I said not to be confused with the Black Widow outfit, which is the complete black enveloping chador in Iran, they call it. You know, she's like a tree hugger hippie Muslim, so nice colored colors and fabrics. So.
Now, do you believe in Sharia law? That's the law of the Quran.
Well, I used to believe that, I mean, I believe in the concept of divine laws, very similar to what we have in Judaism. But at one point, I was a supporter of incorporating it into the public system here. But I saw that in reality, we can't keep our own houses in order. How are we going to implement divine laws? So I no longer subscribe to that. I think that Muslims generally are too dysfunctional to be able to undertake such a venture.
I want to ask you this. You did a dramatic thing. I'll call it a patriotic thing. You were part of the team, the CSIS and RCMP team that stopped these guys. I don't know if they would have been successful, but, you know, we've seen...
We weren't going to wait to find out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How have you been treated by the Muslim community, especially in Toronto?
Well, when the case first broke out, I was immediately persona non grata. I was a traitor.
But who said that? I mean, I can imagine there's some people, but do you go to mosque?
I do, yeah.
Which one? Can I ask?
Well, Masjid al-Nur. It's actually the one run by my father, and I think that's the reason why I can do that.
Can you go to other? How do other people like Ali Hindi and?
Yeah, no. Those some places are no-go zones for me. But I can still go, and I do go, and you know, I get dirty looks, I get congratulations, It's lessened now, but when it first happened, it was there wasn't really anywhere that I could go. It was.
Did they call you an infidel? Did they call you an apostate?
Oh yeah, there's a whole website set up just for me, declaring me an apostate, that I'm deserving of death, and all this and that. So,
you were born in Canada.
Yep.
Some of these boys, I'm calling them, some were boys, but some were men in the Toronto 18. Some of them were born in Canada. How can people who were born in Canada and have all the benefits and the freedoms of Canada, how can their hearts be turned against the country? You were born in Canada, and you said you wavered a bit. You went overseas, Afghanistan, it's not a good place, Syria, not a good place, and you came back to the Canadian way. What turned some of these other Canadian-born members of the Toronto 18 against the country that's been so generous to them and their families?
Yeah, I think it's a question of identity and what you identify yourself as. A lot of these people, even still today, they don't make the effort to self-identify as Canadian. I was very lucky. When I was young, I was in the Army Cadets, and one of the things that we learned, there was a subject called citizenship training. You know, I will never forget things like February 15, 1965 was the day the Canadian flag was proclaimed the official flag of Canada. This kind of upbringing and influence of citizenship training, I think, is very important to have, and I think it's because I had that is why I was able to come back to it.
I want to talk to you about alienation during the break, and I hope you don't mention this. I hope you don't mind me mentioning it. But you were saying that your wife was born a Christian, I assume, or a Gentile, and that she was sort of goth, and was it sounded like maybe she was alienated by her life before, and obviously chose to become a Muslim. Is part of the draw of purist Islam a rejection of hollow values in secular society? Is that
Yes.
what made your wife become a niqab wearing woman?
And even myself, I had the Taliban beard, you know, robe down to the knees, black turban, and I think it is that you feel that you've rejected the mainstream society and you just don't want to be a part of it. You don't want to look like them, you don't want to walk like them, talk like them, eat like them.
I reject things too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm irritated all the time by what I see. I feel like I can engage within the system to fix things within some four corners of, you know, democracy and is the answer to integrate young Muslims into processes and say, look, you don't have to push everything away, and you certainly don't have to punch everything away.
Yeah.
You can get involved and we can have a discussion. Does that even work?
It does work. I think there's so much such a confrontational approach to all this. I think if we do encourage communities to do that, to say, listen, we need forums of discussion, like you were talking about, free exchange of ideas. We need that kind of stuff, and I think.
But it's two ways too, where young Muslim men can and women can take criticism too. One of the things I'm always on about is censorship. You cannot criticize. I believe we all ought to be open to criticism. Is that something the Muslim community is comfortable with yet?
I don't think so. I think some things they just, you know, they react so emotionally, and that's the problem.
Well, I mean, I get it. No one wants to be declared the other or the bad guy.
Right, of
but
course.
part of Canada's cut and thrust. I got one last question for you because we're almost out of time. You stepped in an important moment and you blew the whistle on a bunch of bad guys, many of whom are being convicted and sent away for a long
11
time.
convictions.
That's terrifying to me. Large Muslim community in Canada, obviously the vast majority of them are peaceful. Is there still a threat in Canada of homegrown terrorism in our country?
Of course.
You say that without a moment's hesitation.
Because I know.
Well, do you think that our government is doing enough to keep an eye on things, or do you think that they're being hamstrung by the law or by political correctness? I don't want you to give away any secrets. I know you wouldn't. But do you have confidence that our government's doing the right thing?
I do. They're very professional, very competent, very good people. That's one of the things that I saw in dealing with them. You know, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. They hate Muslims. They hate Islam. Completely not true. Completely not true.
Last question. Many Muslim immigrants come to Canada every year, many fleeing tyranny, but some maybe not quite in sync with the liberal values. They haven't had that training you did in cadets. Should we be doing anything with incoming immigrants from Muslim countries, especially places where there's radicalism? Should we be doing anything or more to absorb them into our Canadian liberal values?
We should not wait for them to come here before we do that. We should have training programs there as they're waiting for their visas to go through.
Mubin Shaikh, thank you very much for a fascinating discussion. I hope you'll come back again.
I will.